welcome to Radio Tonga and Voice of South Pacific broadcast from the Amos City, Seattle, Washington, and Manamoi Center. Ko e whamawhalale ni ai le teo le o Pacific Saute me taulanga e malata mo e mounga o hatawhia me Seattle, Washington, America, o tuku atu ia me he Manamoi Center. Ko e aho o lake no September o wa awhi woa. This is the 1st of September 2022. Malo lang mari aho e ki mo lelea tonga koto pe wa o kia e whamawhalale Amerikani pia mo toa pure anga foki. Whawhitak lang mari pe aho e ki pa mo tonga kotoa taka e whanua e whakalakalaka. Tumu a ki hu whangat pe ngai talaka kato ho tau whanua. Kai tuku atu ai polokalama ma kehi ko e aho ni. Kai polokalama ke mautala noa ai Pea mo tokoni a registered dietitian ko Erin Morrisell, me he Providence ElderPlace. O ko ilo I foki ko taha ene ngai ka veinga o fie mao ho tau kakai ko inga ko fie kau aki pea mo mao mea tokoni. Pea ko ia ko wha amu pe e tuku ha mo whainga maarie ka tau fie hui kia te ia pea tene tokoni mai ke ngai mea ko ia e lava ke mo ilele ai tasino. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining us today, and sorry that we're starting late. And right now it's approximately about like almost 5:15. But welcome to our Voice of South Pacific broadcast. The dietitian, it's a great topic to talking about the diet because food is a solution for us Pacific Islanders. And a lot of us Pacific Islanders are well affected, by the way how we consume food. So I'd like to give you the opportunity to please introduce yourself and tell us, what is important to you as your knowledge and wisdom about being a dietitian. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Sylvia. I'm happy to be here. My name's Erin. I am a registered dietitian. I've been with Providence ElderPlace about 4.5 years. I've been a dietitian for about 20 years. And before I worked for ElderPlace, some of my previous experience, I worked in nursing homes. I've always really loved working with seniors. And I'm not sure, should I be pausing for interpretation for you, Sylvia? Is that helpful? Okay. Thank you. At Providence ElderPlace, I work on several different teams. I work mainly out of our Seattle location, but I cover about 3 teams right now. So I work as part of an interdisciplinary team, which I really, really love because that means I get to work collaborating with about 9 team members. So a doctor, a nurse, myself, physical therapist, occupational therapist, social worker, recreation therapist. I have not ever worked somewhere where the interdisciplinary team is as effective, and I just really truly love our model. So that means is that we all sit together frequently, usually several times a week, and we talk about our participants and we collaborate on the best ways to take care of them.
Ngai mea kone whamanatu mai, ko e tokoni pē ke hangi ko ni ke ne lava o whalei, ko e whikau aki ai pē pia moi mo ilelei. I ngai whonga u whapotopoto ke tā mau me tokoni. Erin, if you could tell us, like as being a dietitian, is it because that you wanted to advise people to consume the proper food that helps the body, or you advise people as what not to take, or how do they take their meals? So what are the dietitians, like the main role that you can try to do, especially for the elderly too?
Yeah, so I personally find it's much more rewarding to talk about what is good to eat versus what you shouldn't eat. That's not any fun for people to, for me to come to someone, a participant, and say, don't eat that kind of food. That's not good for you. I think everybody is a lot happier when we talk about the foods that are good for us. So yeah, I work with people on a variety of health issues. I can give you some examples. I work with people on nutrition to support diabetes, good blood sugar control. I work with folks on sometimes people as they age don't have as much of an appetite anymore, and so they've lost weight. So we see malnutrition sometimes with our seniors. I work with folks on that. Wound healing, nutrition is really important during wound healing. Trouble swallowing. So I'll work with folks on identifying that and what they can do to maybe modify their food texture so that the diet is easier to swallow. Those are just some examples. Kidney disease, dementia. A lot of times our folks have dementia or just basically memory loss. And when that happens, sometimes people don't eat as much as they did in the past. And again, with the weight loss and the malnutrition. So I'll work with participants, their family members, their caregivers. Our folks live in a variety of settings. So just depends on where they're living. I can work with whoever is helping care for them. Does that help, Sylvia?
Ko tā mo aia ta whaaki ko ni i he ngahi mau mea toko ni, mo mea kai, o whia au pito ia ke ne toko ni i ai kakai, ka wai whuk mo ki tau tolu. Ko i ngā kune o ngo e ia ko mea ia ko whia ai ne mo ui ko i ngā ko i matātao ko ia pe ko i ta whaaki au ne iai ko i ne ako pe mo ne ilo lahi au pito ko i ki ai, ke ne hanga o whalei ai kakai ko ngā ki ngai whonga o mao mea tokoni whakotpoto. Malo. Thank you. At this time, Tino, I would like to tell you, Tino, to ask you, I see one person here was just texting Tino saying, can you talk more about what is the best food, Tino, that we need to eat, even including, because I have a grandmother, she's 83 years old, and I'm the one that taking care of her. What is the food that you could recommend, and what a type of food that you don't want to recommend, that you don't want to say that it's not good for the body? Thank you.
83 years old. So I always talk about just a well-balanced diet. So if you go back to, all of the food groups, right? So your fruits and vegetables, your protein foods, your healthy carbohydrate foods, just a well-balanced overall, healthy diet is always important. Making sure that I think with someone who's 83, making sure that their weight is stable, that they're not gaining weight or losing weight. That's something that I always monitor just because that can tell me if somebody's getting enough to eat or getting too much to eat or not getting enough to eat. It's a good a metric. We can't always weigh people, and that's a whole nother situation. But for somebody that can stand on a scale, it's a good thing to just kind of watch from time to time to make sure that someone's not, their weight isn't changing. Um, and I always, I will find that the number one thing I talk to people about is making sure that they're getting enough protein when they're eating their foods. I find that um, just in general that it really takes some effort to make sure that we're getting enough protein in our diet.
Thank you so much. I just have another question here that coming from the audience that are tuning in, and they said that so you mentioned about the protein. Is there any natural protein, or we can still eat meat? But um, can you advise if it's good, to eat meat or not to eat meat? But that's where we get the protein.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so protein comes, of course, when I ask people, what kind of proteins they're eating, I'm asking, are they eating meats? And that can be, any variety of meats, also fish, seafood, dairy products can have protein, so your milk, yogurt, foods like that. And then also some protein, some people who don't eat meat, the protein would come from plant-based protein. So we're looking at beans and lentils and things like that to get the protein in that way. With meats, yeah, it meat. I don't. I'm a meat eater myself, and so I definitely think that is fine. The leaner the meats, just avoiding fattier, higher sources of saturated fat to choose the more leaner meats. And actually, fish and seafood is high in the omega-3 fats, which are the healthier fats. So um, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, absolutely. Um, this is my own question, like I'm asking, um, is there anything, like maybe like natural plant-based food that you could recommend compared to eating the meat to get protein?
Yeah. Well, and I forgot to mention eggs. Eggs are nice and a nice protein rich source. But if you're not eating meats, um, for the plant-based proteins, I would look for more of the beans, um, lentils, things like that. I mean, I know a lot of this is going to be culturally specific as far as food preferences, and so um, it's not always going to be what I would have in my pantry as
Right.
far as um, what I'm thinking in my mind is like garbanzo beans and you know um, kidney beans and even white beans and things like that, refried beans, even tacos. Those are protein rich. Um, uh, if you're not eating meat, but you're still eating eggs, those are a great source of protein. And then the dairy foods are a great source of protein as well if you are eating the dairy foods. Milk, yogurt, cheeses, cottage cheese, things like that. Is that helpful? And I would also say that there's some really good cookbooks out there. So if folks are wanting, to eat less of the meats, but to go with more of the plant-based proteins, I think a lot of people want to do that right now for health reasons and other reasons. And so there's some really good cookbooks out there.
Okay. I just have this one question here. Koe whehu I koe ni. Whewhe ka pau te ngāu e ka pēr koe ki o lava e au ia ta ofe kai kakano. Hanko ni o ko kai puaka maupe, kai sipi, and also moi hosi. um, okay, I was just trying to say that in our native language, but to convert into English, what if I cannot stop eating my meat? If I could, what will be your suggestion? I'd love to eat my pork, which is the barbecued pig in any event. And then the
Mm-hmm.
second thing, I eat a lot of lamb. And also, I have some other meat that I don't want to mention it, but um, I'm having a difficult time of none of a vegetarian dietitian uh, diet, vegetarian diet. What will be your recommend? Since I cannot trying to stop eating meat, I'm having a hard time. But I know that sometimes I got gout and other medical problems, and the doctor told me that I have a lot of cholesterol and high blood pressure, and but I just love my meat. I would like to ask you what will be your recommendation. Hana ha mea e tokoni ke hao whalei, ka pau ka ke lava ke ta ofi e ku kai kakano. Hange koe kai e mao me tokoni, hange koe puaka, hange koe loi hosi, koe kai e lusi pi, koe lupul masima, and also corned beef. Mm.
Those all sound delicious.
Yeah. Yes.
So with meats, a lot of times, so meats in relation to a couple of things, in relation to the high cholesterol and then in relation to the high blood pressure and then also the gout. So, there's, I think one of the things that can help with high blood pressure is just limiting salt, is sodium in our diets. And so a lot of times when I talk to people about
So
salt in
you
their
said
diet,
that we have to reduce using the salt on our diet, for high blood pressure folks.
well, some people will say, "Oh, I'm not adding salt to my food," but really it's not just that. It's also reading labels in the grocery store and looking at
Right, right.
avoiding the processed foods or the prepackaged foods that can be high in salt. So I a lot of times I'll do education on, how to read food labels and stuff like that. Um, the high cholesterol, that can be what can be helpful for that is just avoiding uh, the saturated fats. So if you like to eat meat and you have high cholesterol, you could look at the leaner cuts of meat. Okay. So, for example, that might be like a chicken breast that doesn't have a lot of, uh, it's a leaner cut, meaning that it doesn't have a lot of fat. You can look at leaner cuts of beef, leaner cuts of pork. Um, Again, just I would have to consult like a list of what the leanest meats are, but some meats are higher in saturated fats than others. Um, the gout is definitely something that meats tend to be high in purine, and purine is what contributes to gout, and gout can be really painful. So that's a tough one. Um, so yeah, those are all things I work with people on is their doctor saying, or maybe even our doctor on our team saying, "Hey, Erin, would you consult with this person on, these issues and give them some suggestions?" So I would meet with them and try to understand what they're already eating and then what changes they might make to their nutrition.
Okay, thank you. Um, is there anything else, that you wanted to add on, with the topic of discussion about, about our food intake that you think that is the
Um,
most priority or most important thing? Hana ha mea mau inga te ke whale I mai ka te mau tolu, te kau aki moi mao mea tokoni. Like, for example, like we have like fruit drinks, but it's very healthy because it's fruit. It's 100%. But then we put in like sugar and stuff like that, and then like maybe when we have fresh meat, but we put in a lot of the other salt and kind of like coconut milk, and I think coconut milk has a lot of sodium too. So what will be your advice? What is something that will help us ke tokoni ke fasisi ang ngawe ake ngai mea tokoni koni. What is something that you can advise us that we could try to avoid from consume those kind of food, and what is something that you can advise that is a good food, like to start with your breakfast and your lunch and your dinner or whatever, since you're a dietitian.
So I do think it's important to eat 3 meals a day. I
Important to
find
eat
that
three meals.
that's,
Ako
you know,
mahuinga
pretty.
wike ma we mea toko ni to otolo he aho breakfast mo te lunch mo dinner. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult to get in the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the protein, um, and all of that into, it's really challenging to eat well if you're skipping meals. Um, Almost always if I look at someone's nutrition and they tell me, "Oh, I don't eat lunch any longer. I'm not hungry for lunch. I really only eat breakfast and dinner." They're probably not getting the nutrients that they need,
Oh,
or the protein that they need. So just, the balance of overall nutrition, like I talked about, all the different food groups, eating 3 times a day. Um, you mentioned like fresh meats and adding salt and seasoning to that. If you can add seasoning to the fresh meats that's not actually salt, that can be healthier, because we know that salt, contributes to kidney disease and high blood pressure and all these things that we don't want. Um, I think you said adding coconut milk. There's nothing wrong with coconut milk, other than it has calories in it. So if you're watching, if you're taking in a lot of coconut milk, that might be too many calories. You know, it could contribute to weight gain. What else did you say, Sylvia? I'm sorry, you said something early on and I forgot.
okay. Before I could continue on, o kone fale i mai matu aki maho inga a pito e tā ma mea toko ni ko ia 3 times a day. O maho inga ke tau ma o e tau breakfast ko e tau lunch, ko e tau dinner. Ne onga pe koe ke te whia ka ia, ka ko whia ma o ia ke tau ma o e ngai mea toko ni ko ke tau sino, ko inga ke oa e hangepe tau pe masiva o to ngai elemeni te hoto to sino ke lava whakakato ngai mea toko ni ko ki hono whamo i le reo tau sino. Yeah, I was just trying to translate how important it is, to eat 3 times a day, regardless if you're hungry or not. Eh?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and yeah, what I think I was trying to say, what is something that we need to avoid, from um, eating those type of food, especially we have a lot of the heavy um, carbohydrates, heavy fattening on our food. And it's not just us, but ever since we grow up, we're so used to that, And that's, like I said, food is a social, for us. The better food, it's the better event. But, it's just like to help us, as continuing on, to stay healthy, especially when we get up to an older age. When we
Yeah.
pass 50s,
Um,
our body,
I
um,
remembered what you said earlier. You said
yeah,
about fresh fruit and adding sugar to it.
yes,
Um,
yes.
so, the less sugar you add, that's healthier. I would say, when you mention like the higher carbohydrate, higher, the meats and the really savory foods um, that make a good party, right? Is trying to balance smaller portions of those foods and bigger portions of the fresh fruits and vegetables that don't have much added to them. Um, you know that will, if you're eating, like we used to say, or I still do say this from time to time, like if you're looking at a plate, and you divide the plate into quarters, Half of that plate could be fruits and vegetables, ideally with not a lot of sugar or salt or things added to them, fresh if possible. And then a quarter of that plate could be carbohydrate foods, and a quarter of that plate could be the protein foods like the meats. So that kind of gives you just a perspective of like, decreasing the meats and the carbohydrates and increasing the fruits and vegetables. Sometimes it's not about avoiding a certain food, it's about the portion of it or the size of the portion. So just cutting back a little bit can actually make a big difference, and I think is a much easier step than telling yourself, oh, I can't have that food. Anytime we tell ourselves I can't have that food, what happens? We want to eat that food even more, and we probably do go eat more of it, right? Because we've told ourselves that we can't, and that's not helpful. So
Yes. Well, at this time, I wanted to, give out a shout out to everyone that are here. Mele tupo vanisi, malo pito kau mai, toa kase whakatau pangai, ana havea, ko ana havea ko e tō taha iau nei toka ngā e pāinga. Tui tiena kai lea, malo pito mō kau mai, pe whoki kia hulita Nancy Puloka, malo pito e kau mai. Pea moki motol ko tapi lotoni, kwa kia ulawa o whatonga e katoa o Ana Saline, Matakayonga, malo pito e kau mai. Pea pe whoki kia mele whakatou, malo pito e kau mai ke Polkalama. O whalai atu ka ki motolo, ka pau kia mo whehui, mo ka taka tohi mai I he la, ko I ngā ki ulawa o whahoko whahanga tonu ia ki he dietitian. If you have any question, please you can just write it down here on Facebook, and then we'll be happy to relate. We have a dietitian, so she can advise us how to stay healthy and well. Healthy and wellness. Because most of the time that we get affected, by what we eat. Okay, that's just, I have another quick question here. I have a great uncle, he's 96 years old. He's asking, what does it makes him stay longer and live happier? He said he doesn't eat meat. He's a vegetarian diet. He's on a veggie diet, and he also said it's been like 30 years now he has not been eating meat, and he feels a lot better, and he exercises every day, and he like to go associate with the elderly. Is there anything that you can add up to that one?
I love that he's 96.
Yeah.
I think, to me, hearing that someone's 96 and they are thriving, and he is a vegetarian, he exercises regularly, those things right there are probably really contributing to his health and his longevity, and his happiness at 96. So yeah, I think we could all he's eating a healthy diet, and he's a vegetarian. I'm not to say that you couldn't also have a healthy diet and incorporate meat, but I also think that the exercise, the regular exercise is really, really big. I work next to physical therapists who are prescribing exercise, and sometimes exercise is not the right word or the most friendly sounding word, but we might just say body movement. That's really important for our health. I think that's phenomenal. Thank you for sharing that. I love to hear that people are in their 90s and they're thriving.
Ko ia, ko hange pe ko ne ngai whamatala ko toko taha ne na e whetutaki mai mo ne whehui. Ko ngā ko tau hi mga whulmao no great uncle. Pea pehe whake e ia ko ne o sta of e tau ne tolongo fulu. Ai kai kene toi mao e ia ai me a kai ko ha whekau aku ha kakano. An koi puaka, koi sipi, koi pulmasima. pe ko hapulu pe. O ko kai ke ne toi mau ia mea kai kakano pe a ko neango ia mo i lele a pito pe. Ko kai pe ne vesta polo hange ko pini hange ko lentio. Ke tokoni ke te ia. Pe a alewa o ke whamalasina pe. Pe a mo feo i mo i kautore ke reka. Ke ne mau ai mo i lele. What about drinking water, drinking fluid? How much fluid do you think that it's appropriate for a person? Ko hana e lahi o e vai ke tau ngawe a ki whakaaho ke tau inu ke tokon ko tau sino. Ko whehu ia whai ki he tō tā matau tāu kon ko dietitian. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you. I think that's a really good question on the fluids. I tell people 8 cups a day. If you have an 8-ounce, measuring cup, that's kind of the standard is 8 cups of fluid a day. I think one of the things that I recommend quite frequently is just making a plan for making sure that you're drinking enough water. Water is better than, juices or things that contain sugar. Of course, we probably all have our preferences, whether that's coffee or other things, but water is really important. I myself have a reusable water bottle, and I know that I need to drink 3 of those a day to get in all the water that I need. And so, one thing that does happen as we get older, our sense of thirst decreases quite a bit. And so we can't really rely on, I had a participant tell me recently, they said, well, I drink when I feel thirsty. And they were in their, 70s. And so that's not really very reliable anymore because like I said, our sense of thirst decreases as we age. So just making a plan and making sure that you're getting that water in, is really important. One of the things I find is that folks are, and I work with this quite a bit with our physical therapist and occupational therapist, is one of the things we do is we try to prevent people from falling. Because falling leads to fractures, and that leads to decline in health and needing a higher level of care. And water is actually really important with that, because if we don't drink enough water, we can feel dizzy, and dizziness leads to falls. So, and actually, the more medication someone takes, the more likely that they could have, that just gets more complicated. The need for the water, the dizziness, the risk of falling. So that's a big thing we do in our program is try to prevent people from falling and hurting themselves. I hope that's a very long answer I just gave you, Sylvia.
Yes, that is good. Hange koe ne whamatala, o koe te ke tari peke ke whinua. Whe mauia I pu vai la lahi au niste valu e valu, he aho ke inu. Pea oa te ke tari koe ke whinua, ka pau te ke ongo ke whinua koe mahino ko os paku e vai o sino. If you wait till you get thirsty, that means you're dehydrated. So, o whe mauia ke inu ma upe ai vai he taimi kotoa pe, ko I ngā koe mea ne whakahau hawai mo tau sino, waha ako tau kano mate mo tau hui, o koe cushion e vai ko tau baris. Pea o whe mauia ke tau inu, ai vai ke lahi. So I have a little question here. They said, what about eating other than drinking the water? What about eating like watermelon that has a lot of fluid and it's a natural sugar, like apple or any other fruit, like oranges, fresh, everything is fresh. Is it okay to drink my fluid, my water, and then eat those fruit that have the fluid in it, or it's better to just to go by the water?
So I'm really glad you asked that. So regular plain water is always the best because it doesn't have any calories in it, doesn't have any sugar in it. It's just basically 100% hydration, right? But with that said, I have patients or participants all the time say, I don't like to drink plain water, or I have family members or caregivers tell me that their loved one does not like to drink plain water. So, what do we do in that situation? And I find myself frequently suggesting things like flavoring the water a little bit. So, if you took a large cup and you put maybe an inch or so of fruit juice and in the bottom and then the rest was plain water, that will just make a flavored water that tastes like something, and is a lot more, it's going to taste a lot better than just plain water. 100% fruit juice is going to have less hydration and a lot of calories and a lot of sugar, meaning that you might not be hungry for foods later if you fill up on juice. Um, I have had folks with advanced dementia and caregivers say they will not drink water, and they don't even really like any fluids. And I've recommended the fruits and vegetables, like you mentioned, that are high water content. So pretty much all fruits and vegetables have a high water content. Watermelon is a pretty obvious one. Grapes, things like that.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and thank you for reminding everybody and advising how important it is to drink the water. Ko
Of
ne
course.
whale I ke tau winu e vai ke lahi whema o tau ipu vai e valu, au ni se valu. Au ni se valu, pia ko e moe fo I ipu e valu. Ke tau winu ia, ko I ngahe utokoni ia, ka ono whahau hau koe ho tau sino, pia pehe whako tau kakano, moe waha o tau kakano ke o tau hui. Ko e kai koe ngai fuluti, o ksai katoa moia, tokoni, ka ulahi a ngai pe whake moe suka ai, pia tai me tahu ne toi tau a te mo whe kai ia. I'm sorry, I missed that part. If you eat a lot of the fruit and, especially the fruit that have juice, like orange juice, like especially the watermelon, what does it do to the body? Does it helps or it has more calories and take away your hunger?
Yeah, I mean, drinking a lot of fruit juice or eating a lot of the fruits might mean that you're not hungry for other foods later on. Um, does that help? Does that answer your question?
Yes. So it's always better to, to go with the water. Eh?
Mm-hmm.
Aya oku koe whale I whapoto o ko kei totonu pe ke mau ho o vai ke inu ho o vai ke lahi ho fo I pu vai e walu ke alu ke o sino ke tokoni. He koe ke ngata ai, una tau fufula tfo ke vai ai ngahi acid from our body. So there's like water also flush out some of the acid and toxins from our body too.
Oh, right. Yeah. So I talked about the dizziness, the preventing falls, but water also, I mean, our bodies are made up of water, right? So staying hydrated, um, is important. Yes, keeps our kidneys functioning
Yeah.
properly. It's really important for our kidneys flushing out the toxins that our kidneys are processing to get that out of our bodies. Absolutely.
Ko ia koe, hange koe mea ia tako takoni koe ki hange e vai o. O fufulu atu a nge koe ngai kona me ngai mea kai ko tapek tau kai o kai ngai kona le vai pa na nofa na toi loto o au ngai. Ka koe taim kau te ina vai ke lahi, na o hanga pe o fufulu mai leva o maa atu ai pe moto kidney mo mea ko kato kofua. Aia o ku lava le ke tokoni. Pea fie maa upe ke ino e vai pa te lava pe ke kai mo ngahi fuluti mo ngai mea kato ko ia ka oko fu fe mau ke ngawe aki ai vai. Pea mo e ngahi mea tokoni ko ke mo lele. I think one person here said, I just got in. I came in late. If you could just maybe just give me one more minute from the beginning instructions, of the proper food to consume. Ko hanga mea tokoni ke koutou reka mo tokoni ke mautolu ke mau mawhao. Thank you. Good health advice, for the daily food intake. Because this person here said she came in late.
Yeah, of course. So I was just suggesting, of what we call a balanced diet or from a variety of foods. So eating, foods from the different food groups, fruits and vegetables, healthy carbohydrates, protein foods, getting enough water to drink, like we talked about just now. Making sure you get enough protein in your diet, and this just helps prevent malnutrition. Actually, it's one thing I didn't mention earlier is getting enough protein. Eating enough protein helps preserve your muscle mass. So when we don't eat enough protein, our muscles can kind of our bodies may use our muscles for fuel, which means that we're not as strong anymore because we're losing muscle mass. And we actually lose muscle mass naturally through the aging process as we age anyway. So we want to really preserve that muscle mass, and that means eating enough protein, again, to help stay healthy and help prevent falls. What else did we talk about? Avoiding really high salt foods, because salt can contribute to high blood pressure, kidney disease, things like that. Overall, I think just eating fresh foods and homemade, I shouldn't say homemade, but like avoiding the processed foods, we used to say, or when I worked in a previous job, I used to say, if you go into the grocery store, you're staying to the outside edges of the grocery store, right? Because that's where you're hitting all of the produce, your dairy, your fresh meats, your breads. In the middle of the grocery store is where you find more of the frozen, prepared meals like TV dinners that may have more preservatives in them, and they may have higher sodium content in those foods. Can you think of anything else, Sylvia, that I forgot?
I just saw this person just sending another question, but I wanted to say hello to everybody. Malo apita kau mai ke polokalama se ne halahala mele amila tuitiana pape fakia anti kelela tu he toka malo apita kau mai pia no elini finau all the way to Vancouver malo apita kau mai ko e ngai fale ipe ki he ma o me toko ni mo ilelei lisita ka fa atu vea inu ai pe vai ke lahi te a whanonu ko toa whanonu malo apita kau mai maata mo o rof mele a mira pea mo fiwa ngai to tau malo pito mo kau mai ke prokalama ka pape ke ha mo ki fehu i po lava pe ke mo hu mai e ata o tohi mai ai ta fia foki ko to whanonu malo pito kau mai ta fia foko ngā koe mau ha ka kai ke na wanga whare i ki tau tolu whamanatu mai ai anga e whaunga o e ma'u mea tokoni mo ulelei. At this time, I'll take this only like couple more minutes. I'll take this 30-second here to play this nice little melodious song, all the way from the South Seas. And then we'll go back, with the one last question. Finish up our program for today. Ko ia, ko e tukai ai hao sei ai pe ia. Mana tu I whaki e mao ho malo hi ka ke mao e mea toko ni mo I lelei. Hange kona ne whamanatu mai e ka mata. Ka pau lewa te ke hanga e koe o skipe ngahi mao mea toko ni. Pea mo sisi ho inu. Te ke ongo e ko ia ke kamata ke mei ni nimo. Hange ke mei toka kovi pa ke ki salu. O lahi ai tō ai kau tō reke reka. Lahe nau tō ko sisi ai vai I ho nau sino. Pea ne wesi ai pe mo tau ngai kālawa mo tau ngai huoa. Ko ia tau whiawhia hani koe maa ngai polo kalama whaafu ofa pehe ke tokoni mai kia ki tau tolu I he whaunga o maa mea tokoni. Pea ko ia te toi oange whainga mari ko niki ai ko I ngā koe tu koe taimini ko e toi mini te tolu ki he hoko totonu koe ai ono. So now we're wrapping up right now. It's about 5:57. I'll give you the one last chance you think it's important to advise everybody, about as you being a dietitian, what is the best advice that you could remind the elderly and also for everyone that are tuning in. Ko haha o falei ke tokoni. And I did mention to everyone to make sure they drink their water and don't skip the meals. Okay, Erin?
Yes. Drink your water. Don't skip meals. Enjoy your food. Food is so important, and it's, it's a big part of our joy and our happiness as humans that we enjoy the food that we're eating, right? So that's a lot of what I do actually is quality of life conversations about what kind of foods people like. So enjoy your foods. Eat a balanced diet. Eat from all the food groups. Yeah, I think that's it.
All right. Thank you so much. Hange ko ne ngai whalei pau pe ke oa te inu e vai ke lahi, pea oa te ke hanga o skipi ka ho o mak mea tokoni, neonga pe koe ki whea kaia ka mahu inga upito ke mak o mea tokoni. Pongpongi ho ata e whiawhi. Mawha malo at ka koe Erin. Thank you so much Erin for joining us. Thank you for the great advice, about our food intake. And we look forward to have another program with you in the future. And also, Erin is from the Providence ElderPlace. Whamanata tai peheni, koe nā ngai polo kalama lelei au pito ke tokoni ke kautau reke reka, nā nofo pei api. Alat pe nā mea lere, o spuka pe nā taim te pile, o sisio pe nā to I lo I ho ngai skero kota pe. Pe ko whea peha toke tā ke alke, lava pe alate mea lere, o ave koe, pe lava pe ke alate toke tā, o a aiki api, ka pau koe ke lava alke toe tā. Koe ngahi polo kalama lelei au pito eni kui koe Providence ElderPlace, koe nau tuku at pe whika telefoni, koe wanoa ono, tolu wanoa nima tolu wanima. Wanoa ono free, tolu wanoa nima tolu wanima, 206-320-5325. Thank you so much, Erin, for joining us today. And we look forward to have you in our next program in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Ai, 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 ai,